We're going to get the last panel going, which is It's About to Get Real panel for all you aspiring developers, and a little therapeutic for all of us that navigated the world. Before I get started, has somebody lost a pair of Maui Jim sunglasses?
They're mine, man. Thank you.
All right, Michael Lander.
$10, I guess.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, today's final topic, and I jokingly sent out an email to the panelists this morning saying, all right, well, we're the final panel of the day. And by this time, everyone's usually thinking they're tired and they're thinking, come on, let's just end this and get to drinking. And I said, well, let's give them something to drink about and think about. The title of this last panel is Maintaining Your Health, Your Family, and Your Sanity During the Development Journey. And so I will just say, for those of you who haven't been through it, and a lot of you have, as we heard earlier, this is a tough business, and it's got a lot of uncertainty baked into it, and a lot of nuances, and it reminds me, I've been 13 years in the business and started in the Great Recession, and I was just telling Liz, navigated an unexpected divorce during this process with little kids and balancing work life, sharing custody with young children and building a company, and then learning the business in a very public way, trying to figure out how to deliver some pretty exciting projects, but also feeling the pressure of that. And Jim, what's your saying about you sleep like a baby?
To be a good small developer, you have to learn to sleep like a baby. Wake up and cry, fall back to sleep, wake up.
That's right. which is half.
And shit your pants too, right?
Yeah. Which is.
Sorry. Oh, am I done? We're done?
That's what he said.
But there is a lot of truth in that. And it reminds me, I interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs before I took my leap out of the corporate world and venturing into starting my own company. And it was really interesting how many of my mentors made it a point to tell me, listen, this is really tough, what you're going to do. And a lot of people don't understand it unless they've gone through it. But you're going to get moments that are almost suffocating, the pressure, the weight of it all. And you got to just remember to take care of yourself, because you just feel like everything's on your shoulders. And it is so true, right? And how many of you guys have been through it, where the pressure can be suffocating, and the uncertainty and the heat flash and the wake up in the middle of the night and the, oh, what if, and you go through all the reasons how you could fail. So one guy in particular left an impression on me. He says, hey, just remember you got to keep your star player happy, It's like, and that's you. And so a lot of us have learned, we've been resources for each other to help each other through hard times, but today's panel's to talk about that because, you hear how tough we joke and all that stuff. But so I'm going to ask all the panelists to maybe share a personal story to offer some perspective of just things that came up, maybe unexpectedly, or things they had to navigate, work-life balance, family things, project-related. And so I'll just start with Damien. Why don't you have any good stories you're willing to share with the group?
Well, just a little background, very briefly, to lead to the stories. I immigrated here in 1987 from South Africa. And so 5 years later, I married a catering company, and I got a wife and 2 children with it. So there's a whole backstory, obviously, but so and then I started my first architecture firm. In fact, while Catherine and I were still engaged, we weren't even married at that point when I went out on my own, and a lot of it had to do with her support and belief. And we were just both coming out of failed marriages, and looking back now, I'm 61, so I've been here 30-some years now. The one thing that Catherine and I did, because it was very challenging. Literally, 2 of our kids were 2 and 4, or 3 and 5 when we got married, and then we had one together. we made actually probably the only thing, right, sweetheart, that we did consciously was to say we need to keep our office very close to our home, or the other way around. And we quite physically did that. And the other thing that we did, which really helped us in managing our life stresses, was having our offices in the same building. So even today, we share a reception area.
Oh, great.
And then we each have, our own sides. But especially when you're married to, as we both are, to a catering company, weekends are your tough time, right? That's when the emergencies happen. And so that decision, I think, had a great deal to do with our ability as a young couple to manage family, manage work, and try to seek some sort of balance in those early times. And they were tough. I mean, but I started my office in the lower level of our home, fortunately, and Catherine was a huge support at that time. So it really has been a great deal of living each other's lives every single day. So those discussions between the two of us, and Catherine is a far better business person than I am. I design and she's the great numbers person and the fantastic creativity with food and so on. But I think our survival and our dealing with that stress had to do with some of these very conscious decisions early, because having gone through, each of us, very traumatic marriage breakups, and I did not have children from my first marriage, fortunately, we were so hyper-focused on how do we make sure that what we do out ahead of us is successful and that we give ourselves the best chance for success. And if I was to, I know this wasn't part of our agenda, but I was thinking about books that influenced me. Mm-hmm. There was a book I read very early called The Art of the Long View, and I don't know if any of you have read that book. It's been around a long time. I read it, then forgot all about it, then it occurred to me probably five years ago or so that there really is this art to the long view of your life. Mm. So, and if you have that, if you're able to get that long view, it really helps get you out of those day-to-day situations where you are, you're panting, you're panicked, yeah. You can't sleep.
You're in the weeds.
You just don't know where it's coming from. So I think those couple of decisions, if there are any, I know that Devin and I were, and Catherine were talking. Devin just got engaged, and so he's, probably an example of other people in the room who are looking at their life ahead now. Sure. In the development world as well. So
thank you, Damien. So it sounds like you set boundaries and sort of a shared plan and just like more communication.
We by no means kept within those boundaries. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there were some, absolutely wild and crazy times. But I think looking back, that's what we were able to anchor ourselves to, those few things that we did.
Perfect. Thank you. Candace.
Yes. So I was fortunate with my husband came from architecture as well. So I would say that we both intimately understand the challenges of the profession, and that just sometimes we don't always know what's going on with each other, but when someone's in it and kind of has to step aside, the other person, takes the lead. We have a 4.5-year-old boy right now, and the thing that we're trying to navigate is we're both in high demanding jobs, and how do we co-parent? And it's you read about, women, you can have it all, the career, motherhood, and this and that, right? But to really both co-parent is really a challenge. So we're still trying to navigate that. And then I recently became partner at Pivot, and so that's added different challenges. Woo! So that's added, different challenges to my career. I take my career very seriously, so I don't have any problems putting pressure on myself for bringing in all the work for the company and not sleeping over it.
Yep.
So, and then a couple of new things that are kind of coming up over the past couple of years that we're, working with. We're trying to adopt to grow our family, and that is an emotional roller coaster in and of itself, filled with hope and disappointment and heartbreak and hopefully a happy story in the end. And so, and then I'm also have my mother who lives with me, and she's aging and having some health issues. So
There's a
like,
lot of
I have a lot going on in my life right now.
in a very tough business. It's very demanding and dynamic. Well, thanks for sharing, Colin.
What was the question?
Just what kind of experiences have you had to navigate?
So there's many. We all could probably share a lot of stories. I think the biggest issue I've had to navigate was I don't know, somewhat similar. I'm an architect, and I've been an architect my whole life, my whole career. And about 4 years ago, I decided to start this real estate thing. And 2 years ago, I surprisingly got divorced or split up with my life partner, and that was a surprising and extremely traumatic episode for me and my kids. And so in some ways it was like very focusing on my kids and not even worry about the work. So that was actually very important. It's like, if it wasn't for my kids, like that was a very important thing. But what I think it taught me is definitely of resilience. I definitely think now that my kids are definitely going to understand what resilience is growing up. Yeah. But also that, like, just pick, like, in some strange way, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, just pick your network really intelligently. I mean, I joined this group or whatever, started coming to these events kind of when I was started interested in real estate, and I've gotten so much great advice from people in this room. And I've got great business partners in my architecture firm and in my real estate joint ventures that I put together. So it's like the reliance that I've had on those years of just friendships and community have been really forceful and beneficial, and I'm full of gratitude for those relationships, because that's what's helped me, not only my business, because my business partners are like kings for this past few years while I've been dealing with this other personal stuff, and the advice I've gotten from people in this room even. But anyway, it's like, so it's important to partner with the right people. Yeah. I've made great decisions on business partners and friends and lousy decisions in personal life. But that's one thing I've learned. But but also I will say, meditate. Yeah. I meditate every morning. And I've been doing that for probably 4 years.
That's a great segue, because I think as you go through this stuff, you're kind of like, man, no one teaches you kind of how to navigate this stuff. So meditation is something I adopted probably 5 years ago out of necessity, because I was honestly on my way to having a nervous breakdown. Yeah. And a friend of mine, actually we did a yoga studio with one of our clients, and she reached out on probably one of my lowest days, and I totally believe in the universe, right? And she said, hey, I was just thinking about you. I want to reach out and see, how are you doing? And I just let it out with her. Yeah. And she says, hey, she's like, I'm going to comp you. I want you to come. I'm going to teach you meditation, because I think that'd be really helpful. So it changed my life. It was really wild. I would have never thought about it, but it was just one of the things, that I've used to balance me and stay grounded. But what about you, Candace? Any recommendations on that?
So actually, I started looking at meditation and found a teacher who's a business coach that teaches meditation. And so I reached out to her and started meeting with her twice a month. And turns out 15 years ago, she was a clinical psychologist. Oh, wow. So she's been kind of like this godsend, because she left clinical psychology to take on corporate coaching from like a holistic perspective. And so sometimes I go and have sessions with her, and I talk about, my personal career, I talk about Pivot's trajectory, but then sometimes it's like a therapy session. Totally. And so that's been really great.
Really helpful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Damien.
CBD oil.
Yes. It works. That's all you need.
Oh, and some gummies too.
And some gummies? Yeah.
For the late afternoon, 4 o'clockish. Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get real, we could talk about that.
Yeah. If you want to get real. I noticed we have a robust investor group, but our core investor group are like fathers to me, which is awesome. And I noticed that I'm like, God, man, these guys are like super fit. And they were all about, you got to take care of yourself physically, you know, and I mean, whatever, just exercise, lift weights, whatever. So like I went on this total thing on walking, and it's just been so amazing, like giving me time to ground myself. So if I don't walk every morning to clear my head and set intention for the day, or books on tape or whatever, like it's amazing how you can resolve some challenges just clearing your head. But for others, it's cycling or some form of physical exercise. I'd highly recommend it, but one just for your own health. And the other advice one guy gave me was just make sure you do annual physicals, because he had a heart condition show up on him. He's very fit too, and it sort of showed up and exposed a genetic thing that was in his family line. So he had a scary moment when he was under pressure and stress, and it was like a, I don't know, kind of pseudo heart attack kind of a deal. So definitely encourage you. It's a stressful business and in balancing to do that. But
Actually, on that point, I mean, if I could, I guess if this is where the conversation's going. So I started doing these things, what I just jokingly call my betterment days. And I think some of you know I moved up to the Hudson Valley last year, so I live in the Catskill Mountains now. And I love the mountains. I love skiing and hiking and biking and all that stuff, and that's part of the reason why I'm up there. But every, probably about once a month, when I have a Saturday to myself, I'll just pick out a trail and go on a huge long hike, sometimes 15, 18 miles. But at first it was just sort of as a release, as just, you know, to stress reliever. But then after a while, I started actually giving myself an agenda or an itinerary for the hike, a topic to think about, or an issue that was troubling me. And it's been actually
Super
fantastic.
helpful.
It's been fantastic, to the point where now I'm like, it's, you know, at first it was like obviously personal stuff, and then it turned into business stuff. And I've actually come to clarity in a lot of issues around my business partners and the relationships that we have and what's the organization. I've come up with the developments that we're doing came out of those walks. Like the vision that I had that I wanted for myself and what I wanted for my life and for my boys, you know, all came out of these, literally out of these hikes. And it was just because I sort of devoted the time to do it.
I love it.
There were two other things that Catherine and I did deliberately, but I have to confess, I have to out myself here that we haven't done it in a while, and I think perhaps COVID was the biggest interrupter, if you will. I'm not even going to say the disrupt word, but we used to, every year in October, on the bye weekend when Michigan wasn't playing football, because that's really important in our schedule, we would go away for a weekend. So we did a personal retreat weekend. And we would go away and we would take notes about our financial goals, our spiritual goals, our health goals, our goals for our kids. And I think that applies equally within a business. I mean, if you have business partners or your life partners, that was a great thing. And what's really interesting, Catherine has been fabulous about keeping all of those notes. And we've gone back occasionally where we've set goals. And there is just something extraordinary about writing those goals down, because they show up, and they don't always show up in the exact form you may have imagined it, but you'll read it and go, okay, well, that's sort of that and that and that all kind of came together. So that was a very powerful tool for the two of us in our younger years, if you will, of raising the kids, running the businesses. And the other thing, and we've again stopped doing it, we used to do a Friday morning coffee cuddle. We would just go together, just the two of us, to a coffee shop at 8:30 for an hour and talk, and it could be schedule or what we're doing for the weekend, or it could be other stuff. You know, it was sort of a no agenda gathering, and so we need to redo that. But I would really recommend those kinds of intimate connections, if you will. And as I say, I think it's equally applicable in business as it is in personal relationships to do those check-ins with people, and so that you're all moving, you know, in the same direction.
Yeah. Candace, anything that?
I started, like recently, I also started like going back to exercise, picking up yoga. I do that during my workday.
That's awesome.
Because you know, it's like important for me to be home with my family and have dinner with my family, especially while my kid is very little.
Sure.
Before his schedule gets kind of crazy. So that's something that I've started doing for myself. But
That's fantastic. Did you get that from your business coach by chance?
probably some of that, and then Jonathan too.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like
Sure.
you need
You need to be home.
You need to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
just like
take care of it. Okay. Yeah. I worked with a business coach a few years ago as we were navigating some growth, and same kind of thing. She was just like, you're kind of a dreamer personality, and you need that moment in the day to put aside all the minutia. And so I would do these sort of pattern interrupts, to just go off and music, either breathing exercise, or sometimes just go for a walk, like literally just stop my day and go do it just to break it up. But it was probably one of the most effective things I've ever sort of incorporated into my pattern. I met a guy who's a very successful restaurateur, and one of the things he did was sort of like your weekend or your betterment day. He used to schedule annually a personal sabbatical where he would just go away for a week by himself. And then that week, and he had family too, but it was like super supported by his wife, and he had encouraged his wife to do the same thing. She was also an entrepreneur. But then that turned into 2 weeks, and then now he does a month in Mexico, totally unplugged in a fishing village, and he loves. And he says, like, he swears by it. He keeps asking me when I'm going to do the personal sabbatical. But I love that if you have the means. I mean, he certainly. But I love the ideas. I love talking with other entrepreneurs and just getting ideas and stuff like that. So, like, what advice would you guys offer, others that might be navigating the uncertainties and the pressures of life, balancing life and career?
This probably isn't exactly the answer to your question, but one of the things that I've recently, within the past couple of years, have started to try to think through. My background came from architecture, which is you're billed hourly. You're always thinking about the hours that you're producing, and I've been recently trying to transition to thinking more about the value, the ultimate value that you create, and it's not summed up in how many hours you are producing.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to, if you have something going on in your life and you need to step back and you can't put in the 40 hours.
Like not staying rigid to that clock and being more flexible, giving yourself permission and space to be more flexible,
right.
and
Like
when you're on and when you're off.
Right, I know the things that I need to do. I know the value of, what I'm trying to accomplish,
Sure.
and not tie it to like a specific set of time every week.
I think a lot of people who make the leap from the corporate world into being an entrepreneur, I mean, it's one of the motivators and drivers for me. I wanted more control of my time and didn't want that pressure, especially with young kids. I think that's one of the adjustments young entrepreneurs go with their business, because it's never off. That was really sort of humbling for me. It was never off, and that's where I was starting to have problems fracturing, and like, oh my God, I'm always needed or on the hook or whatever. So I think learning how to balance that and be okay with it.
And the other thing that I try to do too is I send a lot of emails. Sometimes I'm like catching up at emails at 10, 11 o'clock at night after my kid goes to bed. I do scheduled sends. So if you get an email from me at like 8 a.m. on the dot, I sent it before I went to bed. And I want that to convey, because I want, our architects, our contractors, everyone that we hire, first I want them to know that I'm not always available.
Yes, that's a great
I can't always
point.
be available. And I don't want to put off the impression that I expect them to always be available. And that's to people that we hire, but also to our internal staff.
Sure.
I don't want our bookkeeper feeling like she has to check her email at 10 o'clock at night.
That's super important. Super important.
I remember, it was brought up many years ago, Catherine and I were both interviewed individually as part of a whole series on entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs in the city of Ann Arbor by the Ann Arbor News. And the person doing the interview asked me why I had gone out on my own, because I I worked for the firm that brought me here for 6 years and then went out on my own, which looking back was like, geez, you're in a new country for 6 years, and wow, that was a gutsy move. But and I said, well, I wanted to be in charge of my own time. And then it occurred to me, the problem is there is no time, and so I'm pretty sure everyone in this room identifies with that, but there is still that attraction, I think, of doing what everyone in this room does, which is go out there and it's a fight, right? I mean, we've all heard each other's bad stories and rough stories, but there are also these extraordinary victories that are a result of massive effort and tenacity. Guys, I'm sure most of you must have heard of Grant Cardone. He's a inspirational speaker, but he's also a real estate guy. And I just picked up his book called 10X about 5-6 years ago, just for the heck of it. I was looking for something to read in the airport. And that was a book that sort of brought it into focus for me, because he says on there, if you think it's, everything the time, the effort, the cost, all of it's going to be 10X what you imagine, all right? And it's so true in our business, isn't it? I mean, and I don't know that for other businesses, but we all invest so much time and our passion into these things, and we're up against so many hardships in many ways, but somehow we get them done, and these projects happen, right? I mean, Jim, you must be pinching yourself now. I mean, and then we forget that stuff and we go on.
Yeah.
But that's great, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Goldfish.
so. Yep. This is getting. But I think actually coming to this, I mean, I'm so glad Catherine came, because I think I overheard her saying to our son or your brother this morning that you don't think you'll ever miss one of these. Did I hear you? Did I overhear that correctly?
Right.
All right. Right. I was half listening to a family conversation. So, so I think that says a great deal. Is that having an organization like this and a group like this. Thank you, Mr. Hyde.
Yes.
That we can come to talk is so cathartic and so inspirational.
Totally.
At least it is for me. So I hate missing these, and I'm so glad we're back together, because to me these are our peeps, right? And this is how we keep going.
Yep.
So find these kinds of things as well. We both have business associates, so people we even compete with that we share ideas with, and that we talk to on a regular basis, run ideas by, things like contractual issues or an HR issue. How have you found this? How have you found that? And that's been very helpful for the two of us. We're both very open about our businesses and the struggles and the challenges and the victories as well. And having that ability to share that stuff with a friend, a colleague, another professional, I think is also a great stress reliever.
Yeah. Empathy. Right? I mean, we were sort of joking with Jim yesterday at River House. We've all been along the journey. That's what I love about this group. We've all seen a lot of growth internally here, and we vibe off each other, we motivate, we inspire. But we're also there for each other, which I got a little emotional earlier today. I was sharing a story. I called Jim when the world fell apart, really just to check on him. How are you doing? Because of co-work, and we just had this moment. And then Liz chimed in, and then we all were like, checking on each other. Like, my first thought was, oh my God, if I'm going through this, how are the pivot dudes doing? I think I called Jonathan, and we all were just like, holy cow. But being there sort of brought peace to all of us. I think we did those Zoom happy hours. Everybody across the country, right? We were all sharing, like, how are you handling this? Jonathan's a former banker. It was super helpful, I think, for a lot of us. Not knowing what you don't know, but like being open and collegial, I think locally and in these groups is very, very healthy, because a lot of people have a lot of experience to share. So, for sure.
I would build on that and say, I keep thinking about the question Lorenzo asked. You may remember is what advice do we give? Like, my first response is I don't have any advice to give. I mean, this is a seasoned audience, and I'm a newbie developer. But one of the things I have learned from you all over the years of coming to these things, and what I do meditate on, is that, like, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Like, you can do it. Like, it's that.
Not easy, but
it's not easy, but we are doing it, and we are committed to it, and we found a group of colleagues to help support and troubleshoot. But it's amazing. So that's kind of what I keep telling myself is like, I'm actually doing this.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a good recurring, a good confidence booster. You told me, I called you once, this was a couple years ago, and I actually forget everything we talked about except for one thing. Lorenzo's, this is before I had my first development finish. He goes, just get it done. Just get it done. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Just get it done.
Just step.
Get it under your belt.
Forward.
Get your first one under your belt. And I say that all the time. So I got off that phone. I had 2 business partners in that particular deal, and I'm like, let's just get it. Nope. No, don't worry about that. We're going to get it done. Get it done.
Yeah.
That became our mantra. And guess what? I got it done.
Yeah, your first deal's always.
And now I'm like, I can do this.
Yeah. I was sharing with the developer who did this great project, and I was just saying, when I hear these stories, and Liz and I talk about it all the time, it is part therapy, right? But one of my business coaches that I had told me, you gotta celebrate your little victories along the way. It's maybe a good outreach meeting, turning somebody who's been opposed to you, just getting a drawing on time, a design, or and you've got to stop. And so one of the things I did, and I just did it out of pure survival and instinct, was I noticed when I was on projects, like my Newton project was really a tough project. And I would leave there some days just feeling so beat down, but I don't know why I did it, but I'd go to my very first project, the Windsor, which was a thriving, great restaurant, and I just sit in the patio and drink an iced tea, and I just look at all these people enjoying, something we created. And I'm like, that's why I do it. It's my why. And so I do it with every project. I just went through a serious beat down on a hotel for like 3 years, and I used to go just do the circuit, right? Go to all my projects and go, this is why you do it. But sometimes it's like you'll be in a coffee shop, and there's nothing better than when someone comes up to you. And I was in a coffee shop one day, and I had my earbuds on. Some lady taps me, and she's like, I just want to thank you for doing the orchard in my neighborhood. And I'm just like, oh, that was super sweet. So, those little moments, you got to stop and think you're really making an impact on your community. And even like, or like when somebody who opposed you the whole way through, nothing's better than to see them in your project, patronizing it. I had a lady who was very vocal on one of our projects, and she came up to me and she's like, God, I'm so glad, this happened. And gave me an apology like 5 years later. So I just think you got to stop and smell the roses, enjoy the process and the journey, and it's all about growth, and you're constantly growing, and and doing it with your friends is even better.
So
Videotape those moments.
Oh my God, yeah. So you can keep them with you.
So Pivot's starting to try to celebrate more with our team.
Oh, that's great.
I came from, my first job out of grad school was at Adrian Smith and Gordon Gill, in a very, working 70, 80 hours a week. And the way that you keep the young people is you keep them drinking and celebrating after you hit these milestones.
Yeah.
But it creates like a sense of camaraderie because you're totally in this stressful work schedule together, and then you celebrate. And so we talked about doing this pre-COVID. Unfortunately, we had COVID and we couldn't really gather, but we're gonna start with any new project, do a kickoff celebration with the entire design construction team, engineers. They don't always have face-to-face with us to kind of just create camaraderie before the project kicks off. And then once we finish, we're gonna have a celebratory drink.
Love it.
That we did it. Because,
Tradition.
and I think a lot of times developers probably don't do that, and they're just like, great, thanks,
Yeah, especially with your teams.
Right.
And you've all been through battle together in war.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Does anyone, I would love to open this up to questions because we're getting close to wrapping up, but does anybody have any stories or strategies that they use that you think would be helpful to share with the group? Come on, somebody's got something. Liz, I know you got something.
Oh, I will just chime in because I was sitting here thinking we are terrible at celebrating our successes. I know we're all like this. Like, you get through the project and you don't stop and say, oh my God, like that's the corollary of I did it. It's also like I should be proud of it. I should celebrate it. And we know it's always like messy and ugly. So it's never perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. So I've made myself have a party It doesn't matter how mad you are at the contractor or the plumber, or it doesn't matter how many things got screwed up along the way, at the very end, have a party, invite everybody who ever worked on the project, and just
That's a great way to
take a minute, yeah, to celebrate.
David.
Just on Candace's note, actually on Liz's celebration too. When I was doing general contracting, like every Friday with the subs, I'd go out and get the pizza, I'd get the tacos, I'd get whatever we needed to celebrate that week. To feel like we did a good job that week. You can go home, the Steelers are on, whatever, they might lose, but we're doing okay. So that was just a little
Little incremental celebrations and acknowledgement. I had one of my business coaches was really big on acknowledgement. Just starting every meeting, I just want to acknowledge, you for whatever, the value you're bringing to my life or to this process or this project. We started integrating that in our team meetings. I used it in some pretty heavy conflict resolution meetings with some general contractors and subcontractors. And it really is kind of interesting how it diffused. You can feel the energy. Everyone knows why we're there. It's we're gonna hit it out. And it's amazing. I just, start with, I appreciate you showing up. I know this is not easy. I know your supply chain sucks and your labor and you can't rely on anything. And I know you are trying your best and whatever. And it helps me even get in the right mind space to just be more open-minded and team. And that was like one of the game changer strategies that I've ever been given. Somebody else. How?
I'm thought about it just now, but one of the things that we've done after we finish a project is we hire a professional photographer. And we make sure we got great photos of it. Kind of like what you do, Lorenzo. We don't have to go out and see it, but we can. Yeah. But we put them on the wall, we put them up on the website. Because, the camera works pretty good on the phone. But when you get professional photos done, and you have those as a reference, I think it's
Wonderful. Do you put them up in your office and do you share them with team?
We'll put them in the project most times, and I haven't arrayed them in my office, but that may be the next step here as I get those up front.
That's awesome. We started doing drone flights to document before and afters, and the transformations are just mind-blowing, Sometimes I look back, I'm like, God, man, we were drinking the Kool-Aid big time on that project. Or, that got way worse than I thought, But it's fun to share it with people, especially teams. I love when we do a sort of a project celebration party. Nothing better than to see the tradesmen come and just, beaming with pride that they contributed to something so special. So I would encourage you to, all levels, down to the labor and vendors, people love being part of something cool. Anything else? Jim?
I'll give you two, but thank you for that. That was really helpful. Part of this, it's good to hear other people. You feel so singled out sometimes. I really screwed up. Then you hear everybody's doing the same thing. Okay, But two things I think I mentioned. I do this program called Strategic Coach. You go for 5 years. A lot of good things come out of that. But one of them is just journaling. So every day, journal and do three things. Just kind of write about the day before, 3 wins for the day before, 3 goals for the day, and 3 things
You're grateful for. Yeah, that's great.
And what's amazing, you're talking about counting those little wins. When you think it's like, oh yeah, I didn't get about that yesterday. Because you wake up totally sometimes feeling so overwhelmed, and how am I ever going to get through it? It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's one aspect derailed your day, and it feels like that ruined your whole day. But you realize, like, I actually had a great morning. That was a good meeting, a good relationship.
It does help reset kind of frame of mind. And then the other thing is, part of the program coaches this thing called print. And so, it does. When I talk about the book about just knowing yourself, and so there's this thing called print, which is, it's like, it's in the family of Myers-Briggs and Colby and all of those, but it's why you do what you do versus some of the others or how you go about that work. And it was really, really insightful in terms of dealing with yourself and dealing with individuals. You do it online, it's like $100 to get an e-report, and it gives you a lot of information, not only about what you're good at and where you excel,
Where your strengths are.
But then it talks about shadow behavior. And so when you go into the dark place that's not your strength or not your good place to be, and it's just being aware of that, it's like, oh, I'm doing that shadow behavior thing. You can pull yourself back out of it, and it
Yeah, if anyone hasn't done like DISC assessments or Myers-Briggs or Colby, it's super valuable information to just create self-awareness about how I've heard it called modified behavior, when you're under pressure. We were talking about that with somebody about, it's super critical. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is alignment with all aspects, obviously, of your personal relationships, but your professional relationships, because, I always heard when the stuff goes down, stuff does get real, and your partners really reveal their true colors. And we've been through some really intense moments, and I'm so grateful that, more often than not, there've been a few circumstances where you see someone's true colors that catch you off guard, but, alignment, that's where it really comes into play, when money's at stake and reputations and scrutiny, Do people stand together? Are they who you thought they were?
What's that? The name of the
Patch.
test? Print.
Oh, print.
Print. So if you Google it, it's kind of a weird site. It's like the Print Index, but it's like Paul Hertzberg is the originator, but it's really good. You mentioned Colby's the other one we use a lot.
Yeah, there's strengths finders, there's a bunch.
Yeah, but Colby's good. I use that for anybody I hire or people I bring in as partners, because it's not matching, but it tells you where you're going to have friction.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. It's like $50.
I met a developer who does that. He actually requires that because he went through a really horrid partner lawsuit that went on for a long time. And he says, it's just, if you're going to do business with us, we're all going to do a DISC or some assessment, because he wants to understand people's personalities. And he said it's helped him to just manage relationships better. He just knows, because we have a lot of engineering types. Former company I worked with, there was a lot of friction, because it was a high engineer mindset. And when people had more awareness about that, they were able to communicate better around things or how they framed it. But this industry has a lot of that, mathematical science. Okay, somebody else? Anybody? One more. Dave Wanzer, you got something. I know you got something. No?
We have one over here.
Right there. Oh, okay.
I have no particular wisdom to throw out. It's not about wisdom. This is just a thought, an idea. I started thinking about this morning when Jim was standing in front, talking in front of us. I started my career in architecture school almost 50 years ago. It's hard to believe. And I always imagined I was going to be doing development, and I was designing things, thinking I was going to be. I'm learning how to design so I can build things. Well, I never did any of that. I just became an architect. And I did that for a long, long time. And only in the last few years, as I've gotten into real estate brokering, and I'm thinking about the things we're talking about here today, possible projects, that what it sort of feeds into is that idealistic sense that I think most of us have, especially those that start here as architects, that you're going to do something better for the world. And that's what got me into being an architect when I started. And what I'm seeing from Barlow and all the other things we've toured and everybody's presentations is that this group is kind of fulfilling that. These are people, everybody here is amazing to me that you're fulfilling what I started out trying to do when I went into architecture school. And that I'm coming around to this now at this point in my life is very exciting for me. I love being here. This has been amazing 2 days. It's the second event I've done. I plan to do more. And I look forward to staying in touch with everybody here. And maintaining and building more relationships with all the various people I spend time with. So that's
Well, thank you. Great message to close on for our panel today. But thank you, everyone. With that, I'll hand it over to Jim. Jim, do you want to do a break? And
We are in the final stretch, and without a significant program, I don't think I need a mic, do I? We don't need help. Okay. So, great. So we're going to wrap up here, and then we can get back on the bus, and we should be back by 5. Those of you that left stuff at Craftwork, it'll be open. You can get in, stuff like that. So I called this session when I had a lot more energy after the toolkit, what's next? But it was really meant to be kind of a wrap up for the 2 days, but also talk about it. I mean, there's all these great stories. And then energy, it's like, okay, what do we do with this? And it's like, the book's out now. We've had these great conferences. We've seen great work. There's a lot of discussion and energy. I mean, there's some very specific things that I would ask. And the first one is go on Amazon and write a review or rate the book, you know, because I need that just to drive. It needs it to drive sales to get the ranking and get up there, and it's really easy to do. I will send you a survey on this one, you know, just on the speakers and stuff, because it always helps us think about programming. But the next questions are, what else can we be doing? ULI's, I think I explained to you, we're exploring a different relationship or a new relationship or expanded relationship with ULI, where this program will partner with the district councils. National will capture content, but it'll be kind of a partnership of whatever entity I'm doing this under with the district councils to create the content and keep it going, with the idea that we would, I don't know, do we try to have more people come, but then you lose the intimacy and you lose these kind of conversations? Do we try to do more per year? But I'm not sure we can, you know, well, we certainly can't attend them all, but maybe we could reach more people. We've talked for years with ULI about a mini conference, which would be the old conferences of 200 or 300 people that might be organized all around this subject. It could be kind of fantasy of that would be our 20th one, would be this, you know, big conference. And so where would we do it? Like, where's the mecca of small scale development if we're going to do a conference that's going to attract everybody? So those were just things I'm throwing out, and I'm just curious if people have any ideas about, you know, what could be next. What do we do now that I think we got great momentum. We've got the book out there. I will say we're having great response in the universities, both in the design schools and the MRED programs. They love the book. They love the message. They love the call to action to do things differently. So I'm really excited about that. But it's like, so what's next?
I think you're doing a great thing right now by having these sessions videotaped and available online, right? So I think this is the first one where we've done that? It is the first one. Yeah. So that's awesome, and that will be able to be available to anybody that's interested in the topic. Might want to consider like a case study, like somebody brings in a project that's troubled and maybe present it to the group and get ideas on what to do. That's, you know, we all got war stories. We can go back, we can go forward, but having a case study might help as well.
Kind of related to that is some opportunity to have some technical assistance around the room, from marketing, finance, design, the different skills that this group has. Some little segments we could break off, and kind of building on what Hal said, where people could come with to get ideas or get their projects critiqued or to really focus on a specific thing. I don't know where that fits in because we have such busy days, but it's just another thing that seems like it could help folks. I have things I'd like to help people with, and plenty of things I could learn from these folks. So if we could find a spot.
Sharing within this group, or do you mean, because we talked to you a lot about a advisory service panel that is just small scale developers, and then you go into communities where that might actually really matter?
Either, both, really. I mean, just the idea of how do we dial down to some more specific things, maybe.
The other thing I mentioned to Cindy Chance, who, by the way, has been an enormous supporter of this ever since she joined us in Oklahoma, was a small-scale category in the global awards. Now, Pivot Project, our friends at Pivot have led the way with that already, but noted, you know, in terms of elevating this as a real thing, not as a niche or a fantasy within ULI, but actually elevating that as a category, and I think there's a lot of interest in that, so if we can continue to. Yeah, Richard.
What do you think of the idea of introducing this to the AIA as a new committee, all the chapters? That's a huge national influence, just right there.
Well, I think the larger question on that is, what other organizations could we be partnering with to get scale? I mean, it seems like APA is the one that's frankly absent in a lot of these conversations and is so critical to moving this forward. We've done some things with Strong Town, some things with CNU, sort of on the edges. And that's the other thing I'm concerned about is we were having this conversation with Dan the other night. I don't know how many of you know I can't remember, I think it was like 2016 or something, Andrew Frey, who was one of the early founders of this whole kind of program and movement, he convened all of the people who were talking about this. So Strong Towns, Locus, CNU, Preservation Green Lab at the time, National Trust, Main Street. I think AIA was at that one, but it was about 8 groups, and we said, look at 20 years ago when New Urbanism came out, everybody kind of stepped all over each other because they wanted to be the ones to kind of own it, and we completely diluted our message, and we kept confusing the people we were trying to convince what this was, and I think it's sort of happening again. So it's like, who are the aligned partners that can make a difference, that we can all have different constituents, and we can all talk in different ways, but we're all trying to get to the same place. So why do we have to, call it something different and, not acknowledge the work of others and all that kind of stuff? So I think there's a need to find more, get everybody into the tent, and, ULI is generally pretty good at that. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of, candidly, animosity towards ULI because they are big. And so it's like, what do you have to do with all of this stuff? So finding a way, if we could get to some of those, open our arms to get some of them aligned around these values, I think it would be enormously helpful, because all of them touch, whether it's AIA or APA or ASLA, they all have some aspect of this that they influence and could have influenced in a different way. Jonathan, you had...
One of my thoughts was simply to allow this. I think most of the people who come, and a lot of the people who have the OGs of the group, are pretty passionate about this being really influential in kind of the liturgy of their company's work life, right? 2 times a year. And so one of my thoughts has been, if you leverage them to build basically regional meetings, so we still have the intimacy of some of these, where there's 50, 60 folks, but the regional meetings may be in different areas where you now have a traveling circuit that you go to, and you leverage the people's passion in the room to actually build kind of the cohort. And, we were talking about like Detroit. We did Detroit, I don't know how many years ago, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And I think if we went back to Detroit today, and with the relationships we have with Detroit, like Detroit would be a totally different tour, right? And so you could use the regional training as like basically the models to say, what cities do we want to go to next for our semi-annual event? So it almost becomes kind of the way that you test case communities, whether or not they're right to bring everybody there. So
I guess you may have done this in the past, but I think it would be really fantastic to give 10 scholarships to students and invite them to this event, because I think there are a handful of real estate programs in architecture schools, like a few that are represented here that are teaching this, but there's the 80, 90 other % that aren't. And I think just inviting 10 students, whether they're undergraduates or graduates here, to just be exposed and to tie them into this network, I think would be really fantastic to sort of broaden and sort of bring some younger folks into the mix.
We did that a couple of years where one of the local, wealthier developers, the big developers who had made money, actually underwrote that, and it was pretty good. So in New Orleans, we had like 4 scholarships. The other thing we've tried to do is do that for public sector officials as well. And some of the best programs we've had is when we've had like 10 people from the public sector. And I was talking with somebody today. The comment always is, we write all these policies and nothing's getting built. What are we doing wrong? And so Alyssa and I were talking about this, and it was like, we can't call it real estate development. We should call it about implementing your policies or something, because the minute you put real estate development in front of it, it already has a negative connotation. But if you talk about implementing your policies, then people are interested in that. So the other thing that there was somebody we were talking last night, and I've been thinking a lot coming out of Strategic Coach, because it's been really helpful for me. So we meet every quarter, and there's some stuff you do along the way. But I was wondering about some kind of a online, maybe subscription or something, but I called it Small Coach. But the idea was, it was an accountability group, masterminds group, where we could put people in cohorts and have a monthly call, and you just the kind of stuff, but it's maybe more tactical in terms of, hey, I've got this problem, I need a spreadsheet, I need a contract, I've got this, whatever, and you develop, around aligned groups or aligned product types. And you kind of have that connection on a regular basis, and the accountability calls is something I hear a lot of. I don't like them because I don't want to be held accountable, but the idea is kind of interesting. Seems to work for some people, but just that idea of this broader network that we could create that would connect everybody up on a little more regular, tactical basis that then might roll up to and inform what these bigger programs are. So.
This is great, and I've absolutely loved being here. So thank you for extending the invitation to a non-developer. So I think I'm sitting here thinking that you could go a couple of different directions depending on what outcome you're really after, and it seems like there's incredible peer learning that happens here and networking, and that's extraordinarily valuable. And maybe you decide that's the goal. But it strikes me that so much of what we talked about over the last few days, there's a policy thread, there's a financing thread, and it's like, okay, so what's the institution that sort of takes that up and develops the agenda with all of you and runs forward? And I would just put that to you as, the networking piece, super important, but also think about the substantive advocacy stuff that has to happen and the vehicle through which that happens. And honestly, I'd love to partner with you in whatever way I'm able to at Main Street.
So I'm going to ask you, because you came, which I am so glad you're here, but you come through a different lens. You've got you drunk the Kool-Aid. You've been doing this for years. But what's your big takeaway from all of this? What did you hear something or see something that you didn't already know or experience?
Oh, Jim, that's such a hard question. I mean, first, it's the extraordinary passion everybody brings to the table and the sheer tenacity to get that stuff done, to get these projects done, I think is overwhelming, because if you're just a normal person living your life in the world, I don't think you realize how hard it is to do good work. And so, honestly, my biggest takeaway is this is ridiculous. It shouldn't be so hard to do something that, kind of seems relatively simple, which is build a good project. So, how do we eliminate the barriers or remove the barriers? That's where my mind goes.
Just picking up on the idea of a scholarship, so many of us have started out on our own. Some of it, out of college, and we got a break, or we got a partner, or we connected, and we've grown from there. And I think if we could somehow keep that access open, perhaps we're more inclusive. Perhaps we're reaching out to groups and individuals who don't really even know about ULI, who don't have any real concept of real estate development formally, but are in their neighborhoods creating change, or looking for a way to improve their neighborhood somehow. I think if we could drop into that group, which it's a big group, and there's people like that in every city, in big numbers, I think it'd be interesting and keep us on the ground. I love the ideas of expanding. I love the ideas of reaching out to other organizations and associations, and maybe even going upline with ULI. But at the same time, if we could offset that with, a way to sort of have an arm that is really still reaching out, I think that'd be great.
I want to pick up on something both of the last two speakers said. I think that there's a unspoken thread that I just want to daylight, which is that I think the reason those of us who do small-scale development do it is partly because of the adrenaline rush, of course, the roller coaster, but it's because we actually think it provides better outcomes for our cities. I know that's fundamentally why I do it. I don't mean to sound like I'm a small-scale snob, but I am. I can't help it. I am biased. I think small-scale granular development makes for better neighborhoods and better cities. So, I lecture a little bit at UW in the real estate and the business school, And that's why I take the time and volunteer to do that. And I try and talk to the real estate students about it is not just about the transaction. You are building a piece of city. Being a developer means you're building a piece of city. And so if I just want to bake that into this conversation, because as we're thinking about if we institutionalize a few things, if we're trying to get more policymakers involved or get more students involved, it's, I think, because we all want better cities and we think this is the way to go about it.
That's great. I think on that one we should end. Anybody have anything else? Because that was really good. Oh, Christina.
This was my first one to come. I came. Obviously this is my first small SSDM. What is it? SSDF. Sorry, it's my first one. I came because I know the pivot that I came because Jim and I have been talking about me coming for many years, and I felt like I had to come to the Healdsburg one. I just could not miss this one. But in coming to this, I am just so energized and inspired by everybody that's in this room. The person I'm most inspired about is Jim. So on behalf of this group, Jim, I'm giving you a little treat. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.